It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, talking your real estate property news as we do 7 days a week. And you can hear us as always on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. Up to another end of our working week. It is a Friday, November the 8th, well into November now. And I want to talk about some of Melbourne's most sought-after inner suburbs, which are becoming surprisingly more affordable for apartment buyers. Units in prime locations just a few Ks from the CBD are now selling for as low as $422,000 and change. Suburbs with median prices under $700K, like Sunshine and Fairfield in Melbourne, have seen price drops of up to 24.5% over the past year. That is according to the September Domain House Price Report. So those entering the market right now, maybe you are finding better values, and that has got to be great news, particularly with the hellish year that we've had for 2024. And joining us on our Friday morning is Justin Mellar. He is from Jellis Craig Inner North there in Melbourne. And good morning to you, Justin. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast. Good to have you on.
Yeah, good morning, Craig. Thanks for having me.
So if we look at Fairfield and that price drop, 24.5% that I mentioned over the past year, you are in that area, you are transacting, you are talking to buyers and sellers. So what is your take on the price going backwards?
Yeah, well, I think a small suburb like Fairfield, and it is a smaller suburb where there don't tend to be a huge amount of transactions compared to some other suburbs in and around Melbourne. You do get a bit of fluctuation up and down depending on what's selling, but I think there has been a fair amount of investment and new apartments being built in and around both Fairfield and Elphington that has maybe increased supply a little bit. So it's obviously creating a pretty good opportunity to get into the market. There's a bit to choose from.
And is that something a little bit different that you're finding your postcode in terms of more developments, new apartments coming online as a result of, it's obvious, isn't it? You get the plenty of product and prices get very competitive.
Yeah. Look, I think that's right. Look, real estate and prices really come down to, supply and demand. And look, there has been a bit of, for a small suburb, there has been a fair amount of development up and down the main strip in Station Street here in Fairfield, but look, I guess also, we've seen a lot of investors exiting the market as well, with I guess the introduction here in Victoria of a land tax and some tighter rental rules. So I've been having thousands of conversations over the course of the last 12 to 18 months with investors who are probably just finding it a little bit harder to hold on to their properties, whether that's the mum and dad investors who might have a few properties, or the maybe the person in their 30s, they're onto their second home. They've held on to that first property that they bought and maybe finding themselves a little bit harder to hold on to. So, that's probably contributing to things a little bit too.
Now, you mentioned that you're talking to all of these investors and they're selling some of their products. So that is adding to the supply. What are those investors, particularly over the last few months that you're talking to? I mean, where are they going to? They sell up. What are they doing after selling?
So probably in the conversations that I'm having with investors, they're selling in terms of what they're doing with their money. Look, they might be looking to relocate, their own property up to, further north. Obviously, if they're at the end of their careers and maybe looking to retire, but a lot of the younger owners are either looking to pay off their existing house mortgages or maybe just put the money into shares or something else like that.
That is interesting. I haven't heard that one before so openly discussed in terms of getting into the share market, and there'll be plenty of people saying, really, they are getting out of some of their properties in their portfolio, going into the share market. It probably talks to how the market has kind of moved a little bit over the last 6 to 8 months.
Yeah. Look, I think particularly in Victoria, it's interesting. Obviously we're across the whole country, we're dealing with higher interest rates, but under those circumstances, we've still seen, good, really good price growth throughout. Sydney, Brisbane growing 15% this year, Adelaide, and of course Perth going gangbusters over there. But Melbourne hasn't really grown as a whole over the last 12 months at all. And look, I guess you can really only put that down to perhaps the land tax. So I think as an investor, they're getting their land tax bill and also dealing with higher interest rates and probably not really seeing a huge return, particularly if they are holding a mortgage as well. So.
Yeah, the land tax, that has been such a big talking point and a bit of a no-brainer for some of these investors just to disappear out of the market. We'll come back in just a moment and we will continue our conversation looking at this particular postcode and some of the values for first home buyers. We'll talk about that next.
We help to break down real estate every day to help you better understand the Australian property market.
The upper North Shore is becoming as popular as the lower North Shore, particularly due to value for money. What factors are you seeing regarding that?
I'm encouraged to see those numbers. I grew up on the upper North Shore, so I can see the appeals in those areas. To answer your question, I see the trend of people moving to the upper North Shore. One point I'd make probably on the contrary is I don't think it's purely an affordability issue. I think there's attractive buying up there and you certainly do get more for your money, but it's also it's a big lifestyle move for these young families. People who have either grown up on the upper North Shore, like myself, are looking to get their kids into schools, get into that private school band, and clearly is increasing popularity and demand up there because the numbers don't lie.
You can join the conversation every week on the Real Estate Podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Friday, talking all things property this morning in Melbourne with Justin. And I just want to come back to different postcodes around Australia, because you can be in one postcode and then two postcodes or even one postcode over. It is like living in a different planet. How does your suburb, Justin, in terms of Fairfield, how does that fit into other close by postcodes regarding price and, I guess, livability?
Yeah, look, Fairfield's a really unique suburb, actually. It's got a very vibrant central shopping strip that really underpins the community here with the train station and the schools. So, look, it does very much create a village feel that you're probably accustomed to, maybe an outer suburb or a country town. And look, we're only 6 or 7 kilometres from the city. And look, you don't see that in any suburb closer in. So it's really about as close to the city as you're going to see that sort of village and community feel. And look, we've also got, obviously Yarraband Parkland, that part of Fairfield really, and it's Melbourne's largest, bushland park. So it's got a lot going for it.
Now let's look at those first-time buyers, because the median price drop, as we were talking about before the break, 24.5% over the past year, representing some great values for first-home buyers. You're talking to a lot of them. How many of these transactions have you done over the last couple of months as a result of that?
Yeah, well, look, quite a few, and obviously with a number of properties that are coming on the market, and some of those investors exiting the market. Look, I think therein lies the opportunity for a lot of the first home buyers that we are meeting, and some really great opportunities to pick up really a great unit in a good location, and hopefully at a fairly good price that they can hopefully get some good capital growth over in the first few years of owning.
What about from different areas moving in on that price point, or even into status, I guess, looking at those prices with a lot of interest?
Predominantly, obviously, we've got the main bulk of buyers are local renters, I guess, or they might be still living with mum and dad. But look, anywhere from right in the inner city, we're seeing people move out to that next rung of sort of middle distance suburbs from the city, but also from more affluent suburbs in Hawthorn, Kew. They're looking to cross over the border to over the river to find better value. But even last week, I've met both a buyer from both Brisbane coming down here and also Adelaide, because they saw value and looking to move interstate.
Now, first home buyers, let's talk about some property tips if you've got them at hand to talk about your local property postcode.
Yeah, good question. Look, if I could probably think about the conversations that I have with first home buyers compared to maybe a more seasoned buyer, I'd say probably the better conversations I have with seasoned buyers are. It's probably more of a conversation, and you're probably more relatable that you get with a more seasoned buyer that you don't see with a first home buyer. So I'd say to any first home buyers who are looking to get into the market, don't treat the agent as, there's a wall. You don't want to tell the agent that, say, you like the property or, you're trying to keep your cards really close to your chest. So I'd just say be prepared to be open with the agent. Let them know that you are interested in the property. I think you'd be surprised that, some really good agents are operating in the area that are more than willing to help, whether it's put you in touch with a good, a building inspector or a conveyancer, whatever it is that you might need to, help get that property over the line for you. But look, that's probably tip one. And look, probably the second one I would say is, I meet a lot of people that have a really stringent, list of criteria that they, either won't look at a modern block, or, they don't want an owner's corporation fees over X amount, or maybe not looking at a main road. And I'd probably just encourage people to say, look, rather than making it, black and white criteria, maybe create a preference. Maybe you prefer not to be on a main road, but I think if you can open yourself up to looking at some of those other opportunities, you'll find some really good value out there because, predominantly if you end up narrowing your search to those properties that are, perfect for want of a better word, chances are that it's also perfect for another 5 or 6 buyers that you might be up against at auction and might not end up falling within your price guide.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say people being a little bit coy, playing their cards very close to their chest. I wonder if that's a sort of a social media thing where people are watching TikTok and all manner of opinions and people are saying, oh no, you don't want to tell the real estate agent your full deck of hand, otherwise you could be exploited.
Yeah. Look, I think there's always a perception, of how an agent's going to be. And look, for anyone entering the market, it's easy to maybe get caught up in that. But look, over the years, I've developed some fantastic relationships with, both buyers and sellers over the years, and developed some good friendships. And when you start dealing with people on their second, third property purchase, you have a much better quality of conversation. These are people that will end up calling me for advice on whether to sell or not. And sometimes I end up telling people not to sell more often than not. So I would say approach a discussion with an agent as an opportunity to maybe learn a bit more about the property, the market. Maybe they've got other listings that they might be able to tip you into as well. So don't be too afraid to open up a conversation.
All right, good stuff, Justin. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning, breaking down and telling us a little bit about the Fairfield postcode there in Melbourne. Enjoy your Friday.
Beautiful. Thanks, Craig. Have a great day.
Every morning from 6 a.m. across Australia, we deliver you the latest property news, commentary and predictions from Perth to Cairns and from Melbourne to Brisbane, 7 days a week, only on the Real Estate Podcast. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.